Thank you, John, and thank all the panelists to be on this tough discussion. Only a remark to open. Even though I thought this crisis is a very important one, trying to compare it to the 1930 crisis, I feel it's in some way unreal because of its length, because of the conditions and the different players that are around. So in my feeling is that this crisis will be a shorter one and maybe not as dangerous as the other one, even we don't know the end. The second remark I want to do that I'm going to speak only about 400,000 Jews, that is 3% of the Jewish population in the world, that actually live not in the developed world, but in the underdeveloped world, and by that only 8% of the current Jewish population in the world lives there. The other cases are former Soviet Union and maybe South Africa. So that is a specific case. Having said so, I think that the crisis, no question, will strongly impact the continuity of Jewish life and also the connection to Israel. Because if there will be less resources, it closely affects the possibility of education, of continuity, and no question the relation with Israel, since limited resources will mean a bigger discussion where these resources are going to be invested vis-a-vis local needs and Israel interests. Having said so, the case with Latin America, I think it's a little different. And in Latin America, I think that more than global crisis, what happens is that local crises affect the life of the Jewish community more than global crisis. And that is the case for Argentina in the year 1999 and 2000. Only to give you an example, 50% decrease in the children enrollment in Jewish schools, an aliyah of 11,000, that means 5% of the Jewish community left for Israel, and another 5% of the Jewish community left somewhere else. So that means, if we take the case to some other places, imagine the amounts of mobility and migration that local crises create in Latin America. Contrary to that, I would say that, for instance, the crisis in Mexico, the tequila big crisis, was 1994, 1995, and then the result was different. We had a lot of migration to the United States, but on the level of the community, the responsibility taken by the community increased the number of students and the enrollment in Mexico City Jewish schools, and that is to show how a community can react to a specific crisis. These two crises had nothing to do with world global crisis, and that is why I feel, and I can point out, that local crises in Latin America are much worse than a global crisis, maybe with the exception of today in Mexico, that instead of Madoff, we had Stanford. But that is a specific case of an investment company that took over a lot of the money of the Jewish community. Having said so, the problem of the crisis regarding Latin America is twofold. One, there is a very strong demographic erosion, that is the destruction of the critical mass in the Jewish communities. And these are the cases for a lot of communities: Bolivia, Paraguay, Peru, Colombia. Today, there is no critical mass in those communities to keep Jewish life going on. The second, yes, is the situation that we face because we don't even have the endowment and the foundation's money to keep this crisis alive. So it's an immediate situation. Either we bring in the money, we don't have, even with a decrease of 30% or 40% of the value of an endowment or a foundation, we don't have that because it's zero. Communities live on a daily basis. Okay, so in that respect, what has happened is that Latin America has created what I feel is a kind of Jews that can be called transnational. Judith Liwerant has written a lot on that. People that used to live in Latin America, today live in the United States, in Europe, or they live somewhere else and they don't live in their own community. There has been an increase in certain people from one community to the other, the growth of Costa Rica or Panama because of the migration from Venezuela. The really worried thing about what happened in Latin America is vis-a-vis the geopolitics of the Jewish world, it has changed a lot. Because as in 1947, the Latin American states with the influence of Jews living in these states had a very instrumental power regarding the vote of the vote of November regarding the establishment of the State of Israel. Today, there is no way that Jews, because they are not living there anymore, will influence this situation in their own communities, and it's empty of the possibility to affect geopolicy regarding Israel or even questions like anti-Semitism and other questions that are related to the Jewish world. My forecast, to finish, is that the Jewish trend continues, and the strategy will be only polarized into two sections of the Jewish world, let's say Israel, the United States, and the developed world. I feel that the situation in our continent, and maybe South Africa and maybe FSU, this varied wide type of rich life that was developed in Latin America, it will come to an end and it will be over. And it will be called a very small period and rich period of Jewish life in this continent through a very short history. I'm worried that this is what is going to happen, and I think I addressed the effects of local more than global crises that affect our communities.